Hi, everyone, and welcome to a special Keeper Live. I'm Lauren Ward, head of global head of human resources at Keeper Security. Apparently, I haven't had enough coffee today. Um, so I want to start off by saying that Keeper is the leading cybersecurity platform for protecting individuals, families, and businesses from password-related data breaches and the most common cyber attacks like ransomware. While COVID pandemic and the rush to remote work surely affected hiring as a whole, it didn't affect the way that we hire. And over the past years, pre-COVID, hiring has become practically 100% virtual. What did happen over the past year is the influx of candidates in the workforce for the first time, and in many years, and an opening of cyber criminals to take advantage of that. So according to the FBI, in 2019, job seekers in Illinois were scammed out of $631 million. In 2020, during the worst part of the pandemic, that number jumped to 1.6 million. So today we will be discussing hiring scams and security and how both job seekers and businesses can protect themselves. So on our panel today is Principal Consultant at HYER Tech Solutions, Mimi Gross. Mimi, if you'd like to take a second and introduce yourself and tell us about the people you help at HYER Tech.
Sure. So what we do is we recruit for cybersecurity startups, Series A through C, usually, sometimes a little bit in D. And what we kind of the spot that we take is that we really do a lot of promoting. We choose our clients really carefully, making sure that we can really help to promote the opportunity to the right people. So that's kind of we sit in a very, very nuanced, very small slice of the industry, but it works because it's a beautiful small community. So, at a certain point, you just get to know all the cybersecurity marketers and salespeople out there. So we matchmake, and that's what we do. And part of, I think, our job, almost like social responsibility in our community, is to keep tabs on trends. And we see a very, very interesting side of trends because it's a lot of anecdotal stuff. You can have data scientists, crunching numbers on so many things in a concrete way. But I think from our end, we see very interesting trends that are sometimes not even politically correct, weird stuff. So we like to share that, so with our clients, with candidates, to know, salaries, demand, and all those things. So that's what we do, and we love it. That's we'll never do anything but cyber, and we'll never do anything but startups.
I love that. You have a niche and you stick to it, right? For sure.
Yeah.
So thank you for being a part of our panel today. And also on our panel is Director of Public Sector Marketing at Keeper Security, Hanna Wong. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Hanna?
Sure. So I work with the federal, state, and local government and education organizations in their journey to securely modernize. So my focus is on securing government employees, like those who access our personal data, such as the information we provide to the DMV, faculty, like those who access student records on a daily basis, who need to, because that's part of their job roles and responsibilities, and students as they're connecting to their institution databases and solutions. These are all vulnerabilities and access points for cyber attacks. And so what I really like to emphasize is that we're bringing the human-centric cybersecurity focus back into the program. I mean, we're talking insider threats. And so it's really important and mindful that beyond just training, we need to do more proactivity, more hands-on cybersecurity practices to those who access things like our personal data.
I could not agree more. That's a great way to put it. So welcome to Keeper Live, and thank you both for being here. We appreciate it. So let's kind of start off. Fake job or hiring scams occur when criminals deceive victims into believing that they have a job or a potential job. So criminals leverage their position as bogus employers to persuade victims to provide them with their personal information or even send them money. And our first question is going to be for Mimi. So obviously the most convenient way to job search is through a recruiter like yourself. But those looking for employment online, what are some surefire red flags that the opportunity could potentially be a scam?
So thanks for the plug. I do believe, while I think there are some people who do an amazing job at promoting themselves, while I promote my company, is one of the things that you get is like you never have to write another cover letter. If you have a recruiter that you trust, who knows you, knows what your strengths are, it is amazing. And on the flip side, not only are we seeing like which companies we think are really going to make it and, you know, in that startup world, but we know people in the company. So yes, we're talking to humans. I would say like my overarching tip, and anyone who's ever like, you know, networked with me, had a connection with me knows I'm all about just like listening to your intuition. Job searching is like looking for a life partner. And I have not found one metaphor for dating that doesn't apply to startup recruiting and startup interviewing. Like the number one thing is just that idea of like, if you have a red flag, you gotta want your own happiness and your own integrity more than you want anything else. So if you want a job more or money more than you want your own integrity and your own like kind of sense of self, then you won't listen to red flags. I think I could give you a million red flags. I mean, those are going to be the same red flags I'll give you when you're going on a first date. The same red flags I'm going to give you when you go on any interview. But I know you want something more specific, you know, red flags around a job post. I mean, look, it's what I do when I'm looking at companies, like who works there. If it's like a lot of people that seem picture perfect without a lot of background, they could be artificial people. I mean, that is a possibility. Look for humanity, you know, look for people. Like if I run across fake profiles all the time. So by the way, this can probably also happen. I didn't find any anecdotes of this, but I bet it can happen just as easily on the other side, where there can be scam applicants who like could even take a job maybe. And like, I don't know. I mean, I couldn't find an example, but I can see it happening. But what I want to say is, yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. You know, you're looking for humanness. And if you see perfection, that's probably not going to be as human as you want it to be. Look for people who know you know. I think it's really, you could roll out a million tips from that one, I think. I mean, I can keep going, but I think that there's a lot just in that. Like,
that makes sense for sure. And as you mentioned, you know, it is about not only them interviewing you, but you interviewing them. I mean, it's a back and forth. So I agree.
And scammers can only have a certain amount of resources.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Absolutely.
So you do have to like, you know, how many people? Yeah, sure, they can make people look human by having imperfect backgrounds, whatever it is. But how many times could they do that? Mm-hmm. And so that's one thing, but there's so many. So we can, you know, I can go into details on like other things, like
I mean, do you have any
specific
actions that candidates could take to ensure that they're not getting, you know, wrapped up in these scams, or that they're actually applying to a legitimate job?
So a scam will generally want to direct you where they want to direct you. So if you can do any kind of verification that's around the information that they're giving you, you're probably going to be able to do a little more verification. So it's similar to what I just said. You know, you're going to do a little snooping on your own.
Yeah.
Not calling the number they give you, maybe going online and calling a number that you find, things like that.
Mimi, that sounds a lot like phishing attacks, right? They're trying to get you to a website. That they're trying to get you off the email into their website, which is spoofed or cloned to look like something very professional. And yet, you know, and getting you to divulge so much information, right? You have a lot of, I think resumes nowadays don't require an home address, but before that was commonplace, right? We always put our home address there.
No home addresses on resumes.
I mean, that was one thing I learned recently. I always had mine before.
And it's funny. I ask so many personal questions. Like I ask how much you make. You know, like I ask so many personal questions on an interview. But what I have to do before that is I have to make sure that they know I'm human. Absolutely. And I have to make sure that, you know, there's a give and take. So I think what you're saying, Hanna, like if somebody's asking for personal information without giving on some level personal information, that is a huge red flag, and identifiable information that you couldn't get otherwise. Just be aware of that. But it's good hygiene anywhere, in the workplace.
This sounds like the dating red flags. Is it catfishing, right? Like, make sure they're human first.
Right, exactly.
Take a little time to do a little snooping, a little background check, right? It goes a long way. I agree. Those are some really great tips. And I think, obviously companies do their due diligence with background checks and references upon hiring candidates. But I'm not sure all job seekers know how to do their own research. So Hanna, the most common way a cyber criminal solicits money from a job seeker is by charging them for their background checks, where they actually hand over money. So besides monetarily, in what other ways is this problematic for the job seeker?
Well, a lot of times with the background checks, it's just like I said earlier, we don't put our home addresses anymore. But I think when we work, especially with government folks, they tend to be a little more mature, been in the job force for extended amount of time. And so they're used to background checks asking for the last 5 years of addresses.
Oh, wow.
And that's common, right? I mean, that's an extensive background check that happens, when you're buying a house or trying to get a mortgage. And so that's commonplace. But nowadays with background checks, I don't think we really need to give a social security number until it's completely official. You don't need to submit an I-9 or the ID, right? Like a passport, driver's license. I think it's called the I-9 documentation.
You're right, I-9.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, good. I got it right. And so they haven't, and a lot of times these folks are tend to be this market of job seekers tend to be a lot more loyal. So they've been in for example, in government, they might have been working in government for 30 years and now looking to move on to the private sector. And yet they're not familiar with what is common practice. Yeah. And so they're giving everything up front before they've signed, even up to the point of contract. Like you should have an official start date. And there are these things that we get comfortable with because we're just so used to looking out for these things that it's almost subconscious for us. Whereas for government, just like with phishing emails, it's just if you aren't, if you weren't born with the internet and you're still part of the generation. I'm part of that where I didn't really have internet when I first, I first was in middle school. I think that's when I was introduced to it, right? Yeah, and so
we're all the same.
yeah, so I'm not. I mean, we weren't.
I think
we
I had
born
email in college for the first time.
Exactly, and so we're not native users yet, right? And so nowadays, the recent college grads, they're able to check for these red flags like phishing emails, things like that, scams, without even thinking twice. Whereas we have to educate, and we have to do more than that.
Absolutely. And can we all agree that no candidate should be paying for their own background check?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Unheard of.
Place to start.
I was thinking about it when we were doing research, and I was thinking well, what are they getting? I was like, and then when I started to do the research and find out that it was the background, I was like, yeah, there's just if you shouldn't be paying for anything in a job search. And, that's clearly preying on people who are having a hard time getting a job. But I think that is just a rule. There's no paying for anything in a job process.
There you go.
The terrifying thing is, what are they doing with the information you provided for the background check afterwards?
Oh, God.
I mean, how do you know when your identity's been stolen, right?
Yeah, I'm sure something not very good, right? So there was a story a few years ago about a person that got their LinkedIn account hacked, and the cyber criminal posted a job from this account and had already hired multiple applicants and accepted paperwork with social security numbers and addresses by the time the account owner woke up in the morning. So this is obviously frightening for many people who are applying jobs online. So Mimi, do you have any advice for job seekers in this kind of position when a role or job seems to move too fast or be too good to be true?
So I'm trying to think. That I saw that question. I was like, I feel like it's going to be the same answer, but I think I guess there's a subtlety. I will go back to my initial thing, which is, there, if you feel like something's off, it is likely that something's off. The only thing I would say is if it's a really big company, I think that you have to calibrate your intuition a little, because they could not care, like, okay,
Sure.
you have the qualifications, we'll put you in the seat. If we need to like ramp you up on something here and there, fine. So with bigger companies, there could be something like that. And then with smaller companies that could go fast, but it could be just because they're smart and they know they need to like get you in before someone else gets you, kind of thing. So it is subtle. I think the same thing applies is do your research. And I'm trying to think of like a couple other things that you might be able to do, which is that like, you're looking for people, try to get them, like ask them for additional, if you think it's moving too fast or you think something's off, try to think to yourself, like, what would make me feel better? Like, which piece is feeling off here? And then don't be embarrassed to say, I'd love to hear a little bit from a sales engineer or something to throw them off, possibly. I'm excited about this opportunity, but, I'd love to hear from somebody. I'd love to get something like see a customer, even if you're not talking to the customer, but like see it in action somehow or something where you can validate whatever your red flag is. Because obviously, I've gone down rabbit holes with red flags. I mean, I'm like hyper aware of red flags. So I have to tame myself around red flags. And I do that a lot. With ration, you pull in the intellectual thinking about what's in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but you don't want to ignore red flags. And so you just have to figure out like what's the appropriate way to validate for yourself. And that's going to be different, like at every stage of the interview. That's going to be different according to the power balance, like how much they want you versus how much you want them.
Yeah. And especially in this market, I feel like candidates have that power where they can ask for more information, additional interviews, and it's not seen as, a red flag to the employer. So and it's exactly what you're saying. They could ask for more information.
Yeah. But I mean, I think where, I was thinking a lot about like, well, okay, everybody says to themselves, like, I mean, I would see this. This is obvious. Like, so I was thinking to myself, like, well, who is it not obvious to? Like, when is it not obvious? I was really thinking, like, what you were mentioning, Hannah, just with college grads, people who aren't used to what is the professional norm. Maybe you've been out of the job market for a while and you're suddenly finding yourself in it and you're panicking or you feel scared. And I think when we feel scared, is when we definitely don't listen to our intuition and we're afraid to ask for things that will, because maybe you need a job.
Right.
So it does bring in a certain kind of, I hate to, like, it sounds a little cheesy, but it's like a little bit of faith that like, the right thing will feel right and will look right from all fronts. And if it doesn't, you got to be willing to let it go, rather than really risk like something that really seems off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Looks like we have a question for you, Mimi. Many people think if a recruiter reaches out to you, it's a legitimate opportunity, but what are some red flags a recruiter may be a scammer?
I like that one. I think look at who you have in common. Recruiters should be recruiting in their industry. If it's completely out of the industry, I'm not saying that they're going to be a scammer that way, but that's a safety is to look for people who are. But I think I always it's not just me promoting myself. I think everybody should have a few recruiters that are like their board of recruiters, your personal board of recruiters, and like just it's all the same thing. Like not being tempted by something that's outside of what makes sense to you. So, if you're in a tight-knit community, I mean, we're in cybersecurity. There's some much more generalized industries, but see who they're connected with, see what their posts look like, see how they comment on other people's things. Again, you're just looking for humanity. But then again, who cares? Like, let's say they're a scammer. you're still going to just look at the opportunity the same way we discussed, I think.
Yeah, just don't provide them any personal information.
I'll provide, and you should not pay recruiters.
Exactly.
A fee to use a recruiter.
I agree.
Yeah.
So Hanna, how do you think organizations can protect their company pages from social engineering attacks like this?
Oh, goodness. Wow. So one of the things that we see, time after time, year after year is HR technology tends to be one of the less focal points when it comes to modernizing technology. And that can tend to be obviously an issue when you have legacy systems. It becomes a little bit easier to hack into them and have these endpoints, right? And so when it comes to these companies, they really should make sure that when they're approaching cybersecurity, it needs to be a holistic viewpoint. It needs to be for the entire organization, not just subsets. There needs to be some sort of centralized cybersecurity solution. But beyond that, I think it has a lot to do with not just education, but putting the right tools into these recruiters' hands, right? Tools that there are so many solutions out there that are user friendly. We just recently found out that there are a lot of our users at Keeper tend to be non-IT folks who are running the admin console. That's a huge, that's an incredibly telling thing.
Wow.
They came out that they were HR users that were running the admin console.
I believe that
was
like
yeah,
they
and
were
I thought
monitoring, like they were monitoring the settings for.
Yes, the security settings. And I think that is incredibly telling, incredibly fascinating that this is how cybersecurity has progressed, that we are really focused on that user, not just the interface, but the ease of adoption, ease of enforcement. And these are really just really grassroots, just foundational things that need to be incorporated in the cybersecurity solution. And for example, you can make sure that they're not repeating work passwords across the board. I mean, you mentioned that LinkedIn scam. LinkedIn recently had a data breach. What is it? 700 million users, right?
Yeah.
And how many of those are recruiters who have access to creating job posts for that company? What does that mean for these corporations, right? Mm-hmm. What does it mean for their protection? And beyond that, now they have that password. How many of us are using the same password for LinkedIn as we are for our work systems and databases and emails? So
Absolutely.
there's a lot of really just simple, no-nonsense solutions out there to really secure people like HR who do have FaceTime, who do have to ask for sensitive information, like you mentioned, Mimi, right? And I think it's really important to think about the human aspect consistently when we are talking security.
Absolutely. I think those are really, really good points. And I appreciate the tips. Digital transformation and security has always been a top concern for human resources professionals for the past decade, and HR leaders will continue to face the balancing act of ensuring that employees have access to their information they need to do their jobs while not exposing any sensitive data in the process. So security practices like encryption and roles-based access to data can help and are among those list of things that Keeper can help with to ensure your organization remains compliant. So we thank you both for those thoughtful answers and joining us, but I'd like to give you a moment to add anything else to the conversation. So what's one thing that you would like everyone listening to take away from this meeting here?
I guess I'll go first.
Yeah, sure.
At risk of sounding like a complete broken record, but I really think if it's too good to be true, it's not, and I think I would say the least specific the role is, the more, you can be vulnerable to that. I don't know if you saw this in your research. There was a story about a woman who was like working for a company for a month before she figured this out.
Oh my gosh.
No.
But it was like the work was weird, and she didn't validate the thing. It was like it was a repackaging scam where you're sent packages and you repackage them. And I was thinking to myself, wow, like that does seem, that like she should have validated certain things or spoken to other people. And that woman, that skill was completely replaceable. So when you're looking at roles that really aren't as personality specific, you do need to kind of come in much stronger. If it's personality specific, I think you're going to see it less.
That makes
so if it's too good to be true, it's probably is.
Yeah, if the salary is 10 times what you're making now, then
or like super easy work, lots of money or whatever.
Agreed. Hanna, do you have any, last thoughts?
Actually, I read this this really interesting little tidbit while we're searching for jobs during the pandemic. It was one of the red flags to look for was if the job description claims it's a work from home job, instead of using words like remote, telecommute, flexible work environment. I thought that was a really interesting one because familiarly, we use work from home, and that's what everyone got comfortable with. And that was one of the major scams that they were seeing, that they were like, look out for that. You should look for something that says telecommute. Yeah. And I thought that was an odd little, thing that I found out during my research.
Did they say why? Did they say why? That's so interesting.
I have no idea why. They just said that it happens to be that with job postings, valid companies tend to focus on making it, making that distinction, right?
Like focusing on like the workplace kind of thing in a way.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. They're being more formal. They're being more professional, right? You're looking for that professional cadence. And as you see that, you mentioned humanity, and there is a great balance between that humanity and professionalism. And as it goes along with, they're also mindful of the sensitive data that they're asking you for. They don't ask it for over email. And if they do, it's after the formal offer, or it's through an ADP system.
Yeah,
and even here, it was, they sent a very secure shared record, which allows for collaboration, but also that shared record gives me access without having to show me a password, or doesn't need to share the password with others, right? And that's the type of, I think, Lauren, you have that type of admin capability in order to send that type of record sharing, and you use that type of security even during the recruitment process. That's what and that was very clearly defined for me, that my information was safe.
Absolutely. And I can confirm we do use the word remote in all of our hiring, all of our requisitions.
I will never use work from home.
There you go. So it looks like we have one more question from Corey. So someone trying to break into the field of IT and cybersecurity with a CompTIA Security Plus certificate, what would you recommend for job opportunities?
So I can jump in.
Yeah.
First of all, I am not a technical recruiter, but there are so many good technical recruiters out there. And I just want to reiterate, I think everybody needs their board of recruiters. Mm-hmm. A lot of IT jobs, many of them have a huge amount of access in terms of like allowing lots of recruiters to submit. So you're looking at a really wide field of recruiters who all probably have the same jobs open, a lot of the same jobs. So find like 3 or 4 recruiters that you really like. You can interview them even, and then really stay on top of them. Stay in touch with them, send them a note here and there, develop a real human relationship with them, and then you'll be top of their mind. And when the right opportunity comes, do that. But also, if you're more aggressive, go out and network in the industry.
Absolutely.
Talk to people who have the role that you want, who've been in it for 5 years, because they'll be, you're not going to be threatening to them, and they're going to want to help you, get to where they are. So network, find a recruiter that you trust. I think those are pretty good tips.
Yeah, absolutely. I can say that pretty much everyone I've ever approached on LinkedIn to network with has always said yes. So it's a great tip that people, it's so simple, but people don't think about it,
Right. And people are scared to do it,
Absolutely.
It's like a little scary.
Put yourself out there a little bit. Well, do you have any tips for them, Hanna, or do you think that Mimi covered it all?
I am what Mimi would classify as the more aggressive type. I would take a look at the company and I look at current recruiters and I ask them like, hey, I saw this job post. Are you the right recruiter? If not, can you connect me
like
with
just
the right
go
one?
straight to the company.
I do.
Of course.
Sometimes I do that. So
Yeah.
now I am at this point where I have friends, well, that I met in this way through LinkedIn, just like cold messaging them. But I come from sales, so I'm like very comfortable doing that cold messaging, cold calling. Like, let's just find it out. The worst they can say is no, and that is not that bad.
Everybody can learn from salespeople when it comes to selling yourself, right?
Absolutely. Yes, I agree. Well, I think thanks to everyone who joined us today for thank you for your thoughtful answers and joining us today. That's what I meant to say.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I'd like to just say that we had our special LinkedIn Live on hiring, scams, and security. So make sure that you connect with these ladies if you have any additional questions, and follow Keeper Security on LinkedIn and Twitter to see more cybersecurity content like this. So I'm Lauren Word, Head of Global Human Resources at Keeper Security, and we will see you all next time on our next LinkedIn Live.
Thanks.